I don't know how many of you do emails or Twitter tweets. Some of you write letters, I know. Well, the problem with those things is you don't have any visuals. You can't read a person's expressions or their face. You can't even see what they're doing with their hands. It's hard to understand sometimes when people are saying things on, like comments on Facebook. Sometimes they have to go back and explain what was I talking about because they can't see what we're doing. Well, our passage today is like that. We don't know what Jesus is talking about because we can't see his hand gestures and stuff. Well, we're going to try and understand that today. What Jesus is telling Peter, we're going to understand that in John 21, 15 to 29. Let's read that, and I'll wait for you to look it up. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know that I love you." "Feed my lambs," he told him. A second time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know I love you." "Shepherd my sheep," he told him. He asked him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved that he asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." "Feed my sheep," Jesus said. "I assure you, when you were young, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will tie you and carry you where you don't want to go." He said this to signify by what kind of death he would glorify God. And after saying this, he told him, "Follow me." Okay, let's try to figure out what Jesus is asking Peter. Okay, it needs some context, right? We always say that. What's the context? Well, this one really needs context. Let's go back to the Last Supper. Before Jesus was arrested, up in the upper room there, Peter had boasted about his love for Jesus. He thought he loved Jesus more than anyone else in the room. So here's the conversation he had with Jesus at that time. It was in John 13, 34 to 38. We studied that some time ago. He says, "I give you a new command. Love one another just as I have loved you. You also must love one another." That's Jesus' top priority. Love. "By all this people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." And Simon Peter didn't even hear him say that, because then he goes on, "Lord," Simon Peter said to him, "where are you going?" And Jesus answered, "Where I'm going you cannot follow now, but you will follow later." "Lord," Peter asked, "why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus replied, "Will you lay down your life for me? I assure you, a rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. Mark records Peter's recollection of the same event in Mark 14. Peter told him, "Even if everyone runs away, I will certainly not." "I assure you," Jesus said to him, "today, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he kept on insisting, "If I have to die for you, I will never deny you." And then, when the temple guards came to arrest Jesus, Peter tried to be true to his word. He whipped out this sword and cut the ear off a guy. Did Peter ever think in a million years the day would come when he would try to kill somebody? And then the guard took Jesus away, and Peter followed into the courtyard of the high priest, where he denied even knowing Jesus. He denied him 3 times, not just once. Did he ever, in a million years, think that day would come when he would deny Jesus not once, but 3 times? I don't think so. Now, remember, When the Bible repeats something 3 times, it's emphatic and it's true and it happened and you better listen up. So Peter really meant this. He was saving his own skin and throwing Jesus to the wolves. That's what he was doing. And he meant to. When he heard that rooster crow, he was so humiliated because he had to admit his weakness. Don't you hate that? 2 things that he did that he never would have ever planned to do, but found himself doing it anyway. He did it and he loathed himself. Did you ever loathe yourself? I have. Yeah. Well, that's the context anyway. That's where we are. Now we can figure out what Jesus is telling Peter. First of all, he asked the question 3 times. He plans to restore Jesus plans to restore Peter to his love, even though Peter has denied him on purpose 3 times. The words, "Do you love me?" sound... Jesus, it sounds kind of pathetic. Boo-boo lips, do you love me, Peter? Well, writing this sermon, I kept hearing the song from Fiddler on the Roof. Do you love me? Tevye singing to his wife, you remember that? And she says, well, I'm doing your laundry. Of course I love you. Do you love me? Was Jesus pathetically asking Peter if he still loved him? Is Jesus so needy as that? I don't think so. No, I don't think that was the point. Well, then why would he ask such a question? And ask it 3 times. Well, it was for Peter. He was doing it for Peter. Peter kind of doubted. He doubted he loved his Lord. I mean, he denied him 3 times. Do I still love him? There's a song, another Jesus play, where a woman is asking, do I love him? Does he love me? Remember that? I don't remember what the play was.
Jesus Christ Superstar?
That's it, yeah. Jesus Christ Superstar. It's quite a theme, isn't it? So we need to understand why Peter needed this interrogation. You know, Peter had probably been beating himself up with the same question. Do I love him? Do I love him? How could I try to kill someone and also deny Jesus? Well, we know, this is a little bit of trivia I hadn't realized until I was reading all these things. Jesus had met with Peter privately before this time, probably one of the first times he met with any disciple. We see it in Luke 24:33-34, where some disciples had met Jesus on the road to Emmaus and they came to report in Jerusalem, and they said this, they found the 11 and those with them gathered together who said, the Lord has certainly been raised and has appeared to Simon. Jesus and Simon Peter had had some conversations prior to this. So this wasn't the first time. This is the second time recorded in John, and it's very important for Peter and for the church. Peter needed to know for certain that he loved Jesus. He needed to accept that Jesus loved him still, in spite of what he had done. You see, Jesus knew that Peter still wasn't sure about this. Does Jesus love me after what I've done? So, in asking these 3 questions, Jesus forced him to affirm his love 3 times. The first time Jesus asked the question, Peter's kind of flippant. Yeah, well, diverted the question. Sure, guy, we're friends, no problem. It's cool. You know how people deny stuff by saying the affirmative? Yeah, it's cool. Or, never mind, doesn't matter. When you know perfectly well it does. Jesus wasn't going to let him off the hook that easy. I think then Jesus waits a while, and they're sitting there munching their food, and he's waiting a while. And he asks again. By the 3rd time, Peter broke down. All his bravado, pride disappeared in the realization that he still loved Jesus and that Jesus loved him. You see what happened? The relationship was truly healed. Jesus is a master counselor. He didn't say anything except, "Do you love me?" Giving him the question. It's hard for we prideful people to accept forgiveness when we can't forgive ourselves. Okay, now, let's look at another part of this question in verse 15. And this one's really confusing. Do you love me more than these? What's the these? Well, commentators can't agree on this at all. You can't see what Jesus is doing with his hands or where his eyes are looking or anything. In my mind's eye, though, I see him, if I was being the actor, I would say that he was going to gesture widely, and he wasn't being real specific. He's gesturing to the disciples, because Peter had said, I love you more than anybody. Do you love me more than these guys? And maybe to the fishing gear, and this was Peter's home area. So I think that these is everything that Peter had set his heart on, his pride and his fishing and his home and his family and his house. Do you love me more than these? You know, it's kind of interesting. He uses Peter's given name, Simon. He doesn't call him Peter. Simon means waverer. Peter wasn't a rock yet. I had to wait for the Holy Spirit. Jesus also reminding Peter of his arrogant boast that he loved Jesus more than all these other disciples. He's reminding Peter of his weakness, that his own safety and his own pride were in the end more important than his love for Jesus. He's challenging Peter to deeper and more authentic commitment. Peter's going to need it. Now let's look at Jesus' command to Peter. The first time he orders, feed my lambs. The second time he orders, shepherd my sheep. And the third time he combines the two, saying, feed my sheep. What is it he's ordering Peter to do? You know, all three of these say about the same thing. The author of John likes variety, so he switches stuff up. He's just saying the same thing over and over. He's telling Peter to forget about his own grief and self-concern about himself, beating himself up, and focus on serving other people, particularly the followers of Jesus. Those are the flock of God. Jesus wants Peter to take care of them, teach him what Jesus had taught him, caring for him like Jesus had cared for him. Jesus is telling Peter that he's a pastor. He needs to accept that responsibility, take it seriously. You know, up to this point, Jesus has been a successful businessman. He and John were partners in the fishing business. That's what they were doing out there. They had gone back to work. Peter knows how to lead. Comes to him naturally. That's what he does. That's who he is. Jesus is telling him to go ahead and lead the church now. He'd said earlier, I'll make you fishers of men. So now, at this point, our Catholic brothers and sisters say that this is the beginning of the papacy. Peter being the Pope, the first Pope, the universal pastor of the church. We Protestants disagree about the Pope. But from history, it's clear that Peter did go to Rome and become the pastor of the church in Rome, until he was martyred by Nero. And that brings us to Jesus' enigmatic prophecy about Peter's future. Starting in verse 18, he told Peter, I assure you, when you were young, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will tie you and carry you where you don't want to go. And he said this to signify by what kind of death he would glorify God. We don't know what stretching out your hands means. Sounds like yoga or something. But if we lived in that time, we would know that it's an idiom for crucifixion. So Jesus is telling Peter straight up that you're going to be crucified just like I was. Okay. That was a shocker for Peter. He had intended to sit at Jesus' right hand of the kingdom of God when he conquered Rome and all this, and that's why he was following Jesus. And now he's telling him he's going to be crucified just like Jesus was. Now it's as if Jesus says, now you know. Choose. Do you love me more than these things? Follow me to crucifixion. Well, that must have scared the snot out of Peter. Boy. So he asked about his partner, John. Jesus, what about him? let's get off of me for a while. Let's talk about John. And basically, Jesus says, mind your own business, Peter. You follow me. And of course, Peter went through with it. He loved Jesus to the end, becoming the pastor of the Roman church, the leader of the greatest movement of the Holy Spirit amongst humankind the world has ever seen, called the Christian religion. Peter now and since has lived in the eternal presence of Jesus Christ, along with the other disciples. So what's the implications for us here in this story? There are 2 points, basically. The first one, we need to see clearly that Jesus is not ordering Peter to subscribe intellectually to a list of points, like a creed, some kind of set of rituals. That's not what he's calling him to do. No particular behaviors by which you can gain salvation. That's not what he's calling him to do. Jesus has been training them all this time for 3 years. He explained God's purpose. He explained that the love of God was revealed in the scriptures and the tradition, showed them how it is. Through word and deed, Jesus demonstrated what God wants humans to live like. To live in love for God and for one another. That's what the whole 3 years was about. Jesus is calling Peter to live a life of service to others, not to save himself, but out of love for Jesus. That's what the Christian life is about. That's what our leaders should be about. Life of service for others, not about ourselves. The Christian life isn't about a set of creeds or rituals. It's living by the Spirit of Jesus, the love of God working through us in service to others. To shepherd his flock. Jesus already did the salvation part. We don't have to do that part. He's already joined us to God through this Holy Spirit that he sent into our hearts. Now he calls us to love him in word and deed, just like Jesus did, following him in service. Okay, the second point comes from that. We need to be clear what it means to follow Jesus. Now, there's a kind of church, they call it prosperity gospel, that says if God has favored you, you're going to get rich, you're going to be healthy. That's not what Jesus told Peter. That's not what following him meant. He's not promising Peter a rose garden. He's promising trouble and death. Why would anyone do that? Why would anyone follow Jesus if it meant suffering? Hello? What a marketing campaign that is. Follow me, come to my church, and you'll suffer. Well, I don't think that's what he meant. When you ask what's in it for me, it's the very thing that Jesus is correcting in Peter. That's what Peter was asking. What's in it for me? For the whole 3 years. Jesus ordered him to follow to his death. And he did. It's so hard to understand this. How is such negativity supposed to attract followers? It's like the opposite. It sure isn't going to build big congregations and beautiful buildings. I think that we saw a video and the Cuban government asked the Baptists, what is it about you Christians in your buildings? Can't you worship at home? You know, there's something to that. I swear, it seems to me that some Christians have sold the Christian religion as just another way of blessing ourselves and preventing others from messing up our sweet system that we got. What happened to us? But Jesus' call is entirely the opposite to that. He's most emphatic, and he means it when he says, follow me, sacrifice all these things. It all seemed mysterious to me until I thought about those men and women who are radicalized into extremist Islam. How does that happen? It happens because they want to serve God sacrificially, even to martyrdom. Tragically, they're being lied to because that's not what God wants them to do. Kill people like that. That's not what Jesus took the sword away from Peter. They want to follow God. They want to serve him, even to martyrdom. And that motivation feels really familiar to me because I felt the same way. When we were young, Joanne and I felt the same way. Well, at least I did. I don't know her that well. We want our lives to count for something, and we left everything in Minnesota to go to, well, this is not going to sound silly. We went to San Diego to start an evangelistic street theater ministry. We left everything and did that. The first week or so, we were living in a tent in a campground with nothing. We wanted to sacrifice for Jesus. We wanted to serve God with all our hearts and souls and mind, bring people to Christ. It didn't feel like sacrifice because we were so excited about serving the Lord. It's the same when we moved to Kenya, although it was a little more painful because we had a family and we had real roots. And of course, when we come here every week, it's the same kind of thing. You follow Jesus out of love in service to other people. That's what you do. It's the greatest joy you can have in the end. Now, don't get me wrong, Jesus doesn't necessarily mean that following him is going to be something drastic like moving to another country or something. It isn't always like that. In fact, it's most of the time not that way. The disciples, they stayed around in Israel until they were forced to disperse. Peter traveled with his wife. Paul points that out. James and the others stayed in Jerusalem until they were martyred in Jerusalem. They stayed home. Following Jesus means loving him with all your heart and your soul and your strength. And because we love him that much, we also love our neighbors that much, and even people we don't know, even people we think we're scared of. We love them because that's what we're told to do. I'm reminded this week that although some of our national leaders are trying to prevent immigrants from coming into the country, evangelical people are serving them in their churches and helping them get established. And there's a disjunct here somehow. God's people are serving. I wish our leaders would. We need to bend over backwards to help folks. And we do. We really do. In this community, you can see it. People do. And then, of course, to explain the hope that lies within us, which is, of course, the ultimate service, isn't it? Because it brings them to understand Jesus' eternal life in the presence of God. So Jesus asks us, do you love me? answer the question? Do we love Jesus? Our actions will reveal our true hearts. Our actions will reveal our true hearts. The actions of our leaders will reveal their true hearts. That's the way we can know. Do we love Jesus so much that we'll follow him like Peter? Or maybe even like the Pope we have now, washing the feet of beggars in the streets.